The next item on the agenda that's coming up is the elimination of the open container ordinance. And there are some people that arrived after I made this announcement, so I'm going to state it again. And the announcement is that you've gotten a little bit of an idea of how this meeting runs. I'll be going to Ms. Heika first to speak about the letter that she wrote to this committee. I will then open up the floor. I will be asking for a response from Captain Thomas and maybe the city attorney. I will recognize you. At that time, you need to stand, give your full name and address if you want to respond to this. I expect you to treat this meeting with respect as it has been going the rest of the night. Thank you. So the last letter of communication here is from Heika, the elimination of the open container ordinance, and Heika, I'm going to let you speak to that. Full name and address.
My name is Heika and I live at 20 Forest Street in Keene, New Hampshire. By now, I'm sure that all of you have read my letter that I addressed to the City Council last week. I feel that I made a compelling argument in that letter, so I'll just be fairly brief now. Bottom line, adults should be able to make decisions for themselves if there is no harm done to others. Changing the open container ordinance is not harming anyone or anything. I actually think it would be quite the opposite. For example, the subject of littering. There would be less litter up and down the streets of Keene because people wouldn't have to hide the fact that they were having a beer on their way downtown. They wouldn't be afraid to throw their container in a trash for fear of getting caught with an alcoholic beverages. I'm really nervous talking to you guys right now. Sorry.
Take your time.
I firmly feel that changing the open container ordinance won't affect the crime rates in Keene. I couldn't find very much in the way of current statistics in the library. Could only find up through 2004. But other cities that I've seen online that don't have the open container ordinance, their crime rates have not gone up or down for changing this. I don't think that open containers have very much bearing on violent or harmful crimes being committed. And I also want to say that I'm asking you to change this ordinance because I feel it's unfair and hinders the right to be an adult and do as we please without harming anyone. I also want to make clear that this has nothing to do with any specific group or organization. I'm here because I believe you should reverse the open container ordinance, and I just urge you to give this matter some serious consideration. Thank you.
I have a comment.
Okay.
I guess I feel fortunate to have a little insight in this. This ordinance was passed in 1974, thereabouts. I was attending Keene State College from 1974 to 1978, and was here while we didn't have an open container ordinance. And I can tell you that behavior in certain areas of the city by adults was not what you'd expect them to, responsible adults. Not only in this city, if you remember, at the same time in Troy, we had huge problems down on the square where people would get together nearly every night, and because they were armed with alcohol, they probably acted a little bit different than they would have. I think, I'm not exactly sure, but I think this behavior and what was going on in front of the First Church in the early 70s and around other parts of downtown probably was the reason that the City Council passed this ordinance. I'm not really sure that it's a good idea. I've been in cities where they do allow alcohol in plastic cups and such like that. New Orleans, for example, San Francisco, for example, in other places in other countries. The difference there is that you see a lot more armed policemen around. Because I think what happens is the officials in each one of these towns realize that this kind of thing is volatile, so that they have to put more policemen on the streets. And frankly, I don't think that the city here is willing to do that. I don't think we have the money to do that. I think that the rules that we have for special occasions and permits is adequate. I think maybe if somebody wants to revisit that and make that a little bit more liberal, then I would probably go along with that discussion. But I'm going to have to vote against this tonight.
Okay, Captain Thomas, actually, I think you might have something to say about this ordinance.
I'm Captain Peter Thomas with the Keene Police Department. As Councilor Clark referred, I think it's a quality of life issue. Alcohol by its nature can and does affect people's behaviors. I feel that there are plenty of locations throughout the city where people can drink. We have cafes that are licensed, etc. I think that the fact that you can't walk down Main Street with a beer is a quality of life issue that would impact the community greatly, particularly in the downtown area. Even with these ordinances in effect, we still have the issues. We just have a means to address it. Were this ordinance to be taken away, you'd be taking away our means and our ability to address these behaviors. I do have some figures if people are interested in what we have had in the past year.
I am.
Okay. On the issue of open containers, the Keene Police Department has issued only 136 citations for the entire year of last year. There is a majority of them in September, October, and I think all of us here in this room know that that's the time the college comes back, and I think that just helps to illustrate what I said previously about helping to maintain the quality of life in the city. Once these educational processes happen, there's a dramatic drop-off. We have 40 in the month of September, 33 in the month of October, and then 5, 1, 1, 2, 2, 10 in April, which happens to be the end of the year and a good month, and then they pretty much drop off to 7 or 8 during the month.
Thank you. Do anyone else want to speak to this?
Sure, I will.
Hold on. I'm actually going to recognize Fred Parcells first. His hand was up first. I'm sorry. I'll get you next.
Frederick B. Parcells, Keene. I wanted to provide the committee and those present with a little historical and perhaps first-hand perspective, similar to Councilor Clark, although I was not in college. I was on the other side of the coin, so to speak. And I provided you all with a letter that I submitted to each of you through your clerk's office. I'm going to use that kind of as my guide to stay coherent. Firstly, I do believe that responsible and of legal age individuals should be allowed to consume alcohol in public. As a resident and taxpayer of West Keene, I will not be directly affected if this ordinance is repealed. As a resident of Keene, I will be indirectly affected if the ordinance is repealed, based on my belief that the behaviors I witnessed firsthand more than 30 years ago, when drinking in public was legal in Keene, that they will occur again, those behaviors. As you all know, prior to 1974, drinking in public was legal. That's when the council adopted the consumption ordinance. That didn't work real well because it was difficult to catch someone actually consuming. Then in '78, the council adopted an open container because that was a little bit easier to control. Now, the problem with allowing responsible individuals to drink in public is the unintended consequences of dealing with irresponsible individuals who also wish to drink in public and who, because of the fact that they are irresponsible, engage in a host of other illegal and antisocial behaviors that are contrary to the wishes of otherwise responsible individuals who, one might argue, are being victimized by such illegal and antisocial behavior of the irresponsible individuals. Urinating, fighting, littering, loud and boisterous and disorderly type of behaviors were commonplace in downtown Keene prior to the enactment of the ordinances. These behaviors typically occurred in the summertime during nighttime hours when people who lived in the blocks above Main Street had their windows open for ventilation and were trying to sleep. These behaviors were witnessed after the fact, at sunrise, when merchants opened their stores to the smell of urine and the sight of litter from the night before. These behaviors were witnessed by the police, who responded time after time to fighting and disorderly behavior, and who were forced to expend an inordinate amount of time and resources on a relatively small section of Keene, while the majority of Keene and its residents were being underserved at that time. It's my memory that merchants, that is those people who helped to create the vibrant downtown that we have today, as we know it, they strongly objected to the aftermath of the night before behavior. It is my memory that the people who came downtown to bank, shop, dine, or just pass through Main Street objected to the sights and smells associated with the night before as left behind by the irresponsible people who could then legally consume alcohol. It is my memory that the people who lived in the blocks downtown were tired, literally and figuratively, of being awakened by loud voices. And it is my belief that the many restaurants that now exist with the alfresco dining would be negatively affected by such antisocial behavior. Over the years, the council has adopted 2 ordinances, significant. One, the alfresco dining, the other is the beer garden, so-called, out at Wheelock Park, which allows softball players and fans to enjoy generally a beer. And even more recently, the bar on the corner of Davis and Main Street's licensed to serve alcohol without food. And all of that seems to be working well in that it allows responsible people to drink responsibly. So again, I believe that responsible individuals should be allowed to drink responsibly in public in Keene. But I believe that you as councilors need to consider the potential for unintended consequences that I guarantee will occur if you repeal the ordinance in question. I believe that there will be victims if the ordinance is repealed. Merchants, shoppers, and downtown patrons will be the victims of irresponsible consumption of alcohol. And just to make a point, the young lady I think referred to drunk people. There's a difference. We all use the word drunk and inebriated, intoxicated. It's really impaired, and impairment starts with the first sip of whatever it is you're sipping, and then it graduates up, and you become more impaired, but well short of being drunk, as we commonly understand it, is when you start engaging in these behaviors that you might not otherwise engage in. So don't key in on the word drunk. Key in on the word impaired and behavior that's antisocial as well as illegal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam Dotson, it's only the public that has to give the address? Because I didn't hear Peter Thomas give an address.
Staff. Not staff.
No.
Not staff.
Not staff.
He's staff.
Okay, thank you.
You're not staff, I don't think.
I'm not. Keene, New Hampshire, 03431.
Thank you.
So I hear these guys talking about, the problems, and certainly nobody wants to go downtown and see everybody, out there acting disorderly and drunk and causing problems and leaving the place a mess and disturbing the residents and so forth. However, I don't think that acknowledges that the world that we live in today is very different from the world that we lived in the 1970s. Today, everybody's camera has or everybody's cell phone has a camera on it. You can upload directly to YouTube. There are people like me wandering around. If somebody's urinating in public, the way to solve that is to pull out a camera phone and make a video of them doing that and embarrass them. And that kind of behavior can be addressed. You can also pull out that phone and use it to call the police to address any kind of problem behavior. They didn't have cell phones in the 1970s. And what we're really talking about here is the failure of police to address a problem behavior. If people are publicly drunk, that's already against the law. They can take care of that. If somebody's causing a problem with somebody else interfering, these guys can come and take care of that. All of these things, that the concerns that I heard from the various folks are already illegal, and they can already be addressed. So what is happening though today is last night these guys arrested a kid who pre-gamed 3 beers and then got in his car and drove down the block, and he was arrested for DWI. And the same thing is happening at the end of the night at 1 a.m. or 12 a.m., whatever it is here, when the bars close. What does everybody do? They get one last drink and then they down it. Whereas I've actually been to Savannah, Georgia, a town that's just like this one, but 10 times the size. And you can leave anytime you want. You take your drink to the door, they pour it in a plastic cup, and you go walk around. And what that does is people don't wait until the last minute to pound their drink down, and then some of those people, unfortunately, go get in cars, which makes them more dangerous. They're able to take their time. Also, when people are bar hopping, going from one to the next, if you're ready to leave and you haven't finished your beer, your friends are going to tell you, oh, down it. So the policy as it is, it encourages this kind of reckless behavior that you guys are trying to prevent. And I think it's a different world, and to not acknowledge that, you know, in the last 25 years, technology has advanced in a way that can address this, I think would be a little short-sighted. Thank you.
I just have one comment when you're talking about the cell phones and the camera, and I'm going to give away my age. Not all of us are equipped. Not all of us know how to take the photographs. So, still learning. Still learning. I believe, did you have a comment?
I don't know. I guess I'd start out with the more things change, the more they stay the same. Human behavior hasn't changed any in 30 years. I mean, you might have a cell phone now, but when people are drinking and walking downtown, I don't know that that's changed one bit. I think Mr. Parcells made a lot of good points. I'm always hesitant, you know, you know, I believe in freedom and rights, but we also have to look out for everybody else. When you say that cell phones are out there now and people can call the police quicker, well, what you're saying is that if we have more incidences of trouble, then we can get police there. So now we need more police because we have people with cell phones who can direct them all over the place. I don't know if that's a great argument. And the one other thing is kind of anecdotal but funny. My wife and I kind of take a little poll every spring. I live on Court Street, and once the snow melts, it's how many different kinds of beer bottles will I find underneath the snow in my bushes and in my flowers and my planters. And with this ordinance in place, I'm finding 10 or 12 beer bottles stuck in my bushes. And every year, I can only imagine if it was removed how many I would find in the spring. So I'm going to support keeping it in place.
Yeah.
Chris Miranda, I live at. I kind of want to readdress some of the things that Sam mentioned, but in a different way. He talked about how now, you know, you can still go out to a bar and get inebriated, or I'm sorry, Fred, what was the term you used? Impaired. Excuse me. Yes, you can still go out and do that, and then you leave the bar and you're impaired. Whether you're walking around or you're at the bar and you become impaired, you're still impaired. The effect is still the same. Also, the issue is obviously belligerent behavior, fights, destruction of property like urination, as he mentioned. Those are the issues, whereas the people who are not conducting these things are not an issue. For example, the nightcaps that occur downtown, the so-called nightcap celebrations, I have never seen fights there. I have never seen litter there. In fact, every night there's a cleanup. I have never seen anyone drive home recklessly. I have never seen anyone get impaired, actually. You know, so just speaking from a real life perspective, I mean, what's really going on, you know, the people are doing this already, and they're not acting in the ways that were described. And myself, I rarely ever drink. I think alcohol is a disgusting thing. I watched it ruin my father's life. I watched it ruin my uncle's life. When on the rare occasion that I am drunk, I am not belligerent. Even when I am impaired, I'm not belligerent. I don't fight. I'm calm. So it's obviously
You're lucky.
it's obviously more about a person's personality and how it becomes expressed once they're inebriated or impaired, opposed to just the simple fact of inebriation. If inebriation was the problem, pure and simple, then we should ban alcohol altogether, and we already know how that went.
Richard Vendel, in Keene. I actually didn't come here, but now that I've heard some of these comments, I'd like to weigh in. My wife and I moved here 2.5 years ago, and we moved to Keene specifically because of the community and because we love the way that this place is. I think that we can all agree that ordinances are passed because we think that it's a step in the right direction. I think that taking away this ordinance would be a terrible disservice. I like the fact that my kids, 7 and 12, can walk along Main Street, and I don't worry about their safety. And I think that it's because of ordinances like this that I don't have to worry about that. And remember, I was a cop in Miami, so I know bad, and Keene is not bad. I think we need to keep this ordinance in place. I think it's the right thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, my name is Annie Callaway. I live at Street. I firmly believe a lot with what you're saying is that it's a sense of community, and I think that when you live in a community, you have to be willing to make sacrifices. And so I mean, it is inconvenient that you can't walk down Main Street if you're a perfectly responsible person and drink a beer. Like, it's inconvenient, and no one likes that fact necessarily. But I think you have to look a lot with, I don't know your name, sorry, but the gentleman in the yellow shirt, what he was saying is that, you have to consider the fact that you live in a community full of people who won't necessarily be as responsible as you are. And I think it's important to, if you want to be part of a community, you have to address those facts, not just by saying, well, I'm responsible enough to do this. I think everybody else should be as responsible as I am. I mean, you can't control what other people do or how they, conduct themselves in public. And so I think if you take that into account, you realize that ordinance like these are necessary, to at least to some extent. I mean, I agree that maybe they could be, for special occasions or whatever, you could be allowed to walk down Main Street and stuff like that, but I think in general that it's necessary.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak for the first time?
Anybody else?
Go ahead. Heika, you had your hand up again. Did you want to speak again?
And not at this point, no.
Okay.
I'd like to, if I could.
First time. Councilor Manwaring.
Someone said, I've lost it in listening to everybody, that things really haven't changed that much since the 70s, and I think that they have changed a lot. As many of you know, my profession is I'm a social worker, and I'm also an alcohol and drug counselor. And I call alcohol the magic drug. And it's magic because it enhances whatever feeling you have. So to Fred's impaired, I'm happy until somebody annoys me, and then I'm mad. And that's part of where the fights and all the sort of negative stuff come in, where it was never the intent in the beginning. I think there is much more alcohol. We have, I just found out about Jello shots. I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Jello shots. It's another whole issue. But we have beer with higher alcohol levels. We have lots of liquor with higher alcohol levels. So I think that that is part of the mix. And the final thing is that, as you were saying, what is the impact on our children when they're seeing people, some who are responsible, some who are not? Are they getting the message that it is okay to drink? And I think part of restricting where people can drink, such as the restaurants or the beer garden, gives that message that no, it's not just okay to drink any old time you feel like it.
I have a question. Aida Burgos, 29 Donegan Street.
I couldn't hear you.
Ida Burgos.
How do you spell your last name?
Burgos, B-U-R-G-O-S.
B-U-R-G-O-S.
G-O-F?
S.
Thanks.
I was just wondering,
Could you speak up because other people are trying to listen?
what is the process of getting a permit to have drinking outside for a business?
Well, this really wouldn't be a place that you would want to ask that question, but if you want to wait until the end of the meeting, I'll get you the answer. We're actually talking about this ordinance right now.
Well, it's in relation to that. I was just wondering why you, across a certain, not even necessarily a real physical boundary, like sometimes it's just like a railing or even just an area,
why it's okay for people to drink on the sidewalk there, but then if they take a step outside of that area, it's illegal.
Want to answer that?
Well, the process involves going to the city clerk's office relative to the consumption of food, which is a simple permit relative to a restaurant. But if you want to also serve alcohol, then you also demonstrate a defined area where the alcohol and the food will be served. So you show basically a plan that basically demonstrates where it will be served and how it will be served. And you also get permission from the Liquor Commission as well as the City Council relative to an alcohol permit for outside. And the intent is to keep it with the dining experience and not allow it to go beyond that.
So, like...
Did you have another question?
Well...
Any question that you want to ask has to go through me.
Okay. If you're a bar that doesn't serve, are bars required to serve food? Yes or no?
Yes.
Well, up to this point, I guess.
Captain Thomas.
So if the areas...
Let's answer that question.
I believe we have two in town, Panucci's and the one on the corner in Davis and Main Street, where the food is not the same ratio as the rest of the thing. But generally, as a general answer, yes, you're required to serve
Do either
food.
of them have outdoor permits for alcohol consumption?
Yeah, one done. Panucci's doesn't go out. They don't
So
have-
the
You have another
alcohol
question?
is the alcohol accompanied with a dining experience when they're outside in that business?
Captain Thomas.
I want to go one step farther, if I may, just answering the difference between people just walking down Main Street consuming beer and people consuming beer at an establishment where you buy it. An establishment that serves beer is required to make sure that you don't become in a state that's unsafe from the consumption of alcohol. So there is some regulation in your consumption.
I have a question about that too. Because there's a bar that was famous for allowing young people to drink, then become way too inebriated, and people are being
You know what, I'm going to
about
stop you right now because basically what we're talking about, and if you want to ask a question about that, is this specific ordinance.
Yes, I'm wondering why it's okay
What's
for
your
people,
question?
Why is it okay for people within a business to, or if they're considered within the business, even though they're still on a sidewalk, why is it okay for them to drink openly and even become intoxicated, which they do at many bars, but someone standing on the sidewalk next to that area can't even have an open container, even if they're standing quietly?
I think I am. I'm sorry.
Just a minute.
I think that the simple, I mean, I understand the questions that are being asked, and the distinction may seem to be arbitrary, but in fact it's not, at least under the system that we've created at this point. There are a set of rules and regulations, laws and ordinances governing the consumption and sale of alcohol with respect to a business, which is what you're talking about, both through the Liquor Commission's rules, the state statutes, trickling all the way down to the city ordinances. And I think the intent of those is to do just what has been sort of generally discussed here, which is to make a very clear definition and distinction as to where the alcohol is allowed and where it's not. Now, the fact that you can't step over that boundary and walk down the street with the beer or whatever, I mean, that's the purpose for this communication that was submitted to the council tonight, to say, well, what's the difference there? Well, right now the difference is that there is a set of laws and ordinances that define what you can do and what you can't do. Whether we agree with them or not is another story. But that's why it's that way. That's why you can have it here in the context of this business, but you can't walk down the street with it. And whether we like it or not, that's the way it is at this point.
Well, I'm just wondering why it's
Do you have
okay.
another question?
Yes. Why is it okay for a business but not an individual?
I think he just answered that.
But he said it's
I
because
think
of the
he
rules
just
and
answered that.
regulations, but he didn't say like
He
why
just
those rules
answered
and
that
regulations.
question. Do you have another question?
Aida, you can
Thank
just
you.
restate that.
Did anyone else? Councilor Greenwald.
Thank you.
Councilor Mitch.
Thank you. Thank you. One issue that none of our staff mentioned is that the establishment that is serving the alcohol has a license, and they have insurance, and they have the responsibility to maintain the behavior on the premises. And I believe that even extends as the person leaves the premises if they leave overly intoxicated. And that's the major difference. If I wanted to serve alcohol in the parking lot behind my office, I couldn't get a license to do it because I don't have a liquor license. I couldn't do it. So if I could throw out a couple of thoughts. First of all, Heika, thank you for raising the question. If nothing else, it certainly stimulated a lot of thought in my mind. And there are a lot of incongruities in the law. I can see a lot of the confusion, and sincerely, thank you for raising it. It's a good mental exercise. So I'll shock you, Fred, I agree with everything you said. And, I'm saying this in a historical basis to city councilors that occasionally agreed. I too go back to the early 70s, as does Councilor Clark. I'm not saying that Keene was the Wild West or something crazy, but it certainly was not the quality of life that we have now. And this is what really this whole discussion steers back to. What is our quality of life? What are we looking for and expecting in Keene? Not to forget that we have a mass of 6,000 college students, and it's a repeated challenge to maintain their alcohol use education as they grow into responsible adults. And just to throw out there open container, with the college in town, I think is totally inappropriate. So there's my thoughts. One thing that I would ask of the chair of the committee, not to put this on more time, not to waste a whole lot of staff time doing research and legal and this and that. I think that it would be very appropriate if you want to endorse it, do it. If you want to down it, do it. But do something, please. Not more time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Donegan.
Yes, I just came in from another meeting, so if I ask a question or make a statement that is redundant, please stop me. I had a feeling you'd say that. I was about to say what Mitch said about the owners of liquor establishments with licenses having, I believe, a legal responsibility to control the drinking behavior of their patrons. When talking with constituents, there were a number of points that were raised, and some were positive, some were negative, but one that I don't know if it was mentioned is if there is drinking, let's say downtown, allowable open container drinking, would the police be perhaps subject to litigation if they were walking by someone and they decided that person wasn't drunk and then that person got in a car and had an accident? It was a question that was raised by a number of constituents. And if the answer to that is yes, then I could see where an open alcohol situation would be really a serious problem. Do you understand my question?
Yes,
yeah.
And I'm going to see if I can get an answer. Captain Thom.
As a practical matter, if we come across someone that's impaired, that's near an automobile, we have an obligation and a duty to make sure that they do not drive that automobile. There's been a number of court decisions over the years, both in and out of automobiles, clearly stating that there is a responsibility to protect the person who is impaired as well as the public at large. So there is that probability. What I also want to stress is that I believe, Sam, you said that it's against the law to be drunk in public, and that's not an accurate statement. It is not a crime to be impaired or drunk in public. The police do have a responsibility to make sure that you are taken care of if you are incapacitated by either alcohol or some other foreign substance. But it is not a crime.
Wasn't the question liability and not responsibility? I don't think you answered that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
You can go to me for the question, and then I'm going to have them answer.
Sorry, the question that I heard was about liability, a legal liability in lawsuits and so forth. And it's my understanding that police have no liability to protect citizens, that the Supreme Court has held that over and over again. No liability on behalf of police to protect anyone. They don't even have to show up when you call 911. So I don't think that was addressed in the answer.
See if we can get you one. Do you want to try that, City Attorney?
I think I'll at least attempt to speak to that. There are a number of issues, and I'm not going to pretend to the committee this evening that I know or have read all of the cases with respect to this issue. But I can tell you what my reaction to that question is as an attorney and as somebody who used to be a prosecutor. I mean, there is a community caretaking standard that is imposed on the police department. And that standard, I think what Mr. Miller Dodson was saying was that the individual that the police officer may encounter, that there may not be any liability associated with that particular individual. Well, aside from that, there is a question of what that individual does if after that encounter the individual then leaves. And I think it raises the question that if the ordinance is repealed, it takes away one tool that what we expect our community caregivers to do, which are the police department, which the police officers and police departments, is to be sort of on the alert for damage or danger that may occur to others from the result of my behavior. And if they see somebody with an open container or alcohol that they can determine with a reasonable basis appears to be alcohol, they have at least the opportunity at that point to inquire and to talk to that individual to see what's going on and make a determination as to whether or not that individual is impaired to the point where protective custody may be required or something like that. If you take away that tool and you have individuals who are walking around, I can see, quite frankly, a good plaintiff's attorney coming out and saying, well, City of Keene, or well, police department, this individual, in retrospect, was clearly intoxicated, got into their automobile after walking by you, drove down the street and hit the school bus and killed 5 people. So I think the answer to the question here is very complicated and fact-based, but on the other hand, I can see that if I were a police officer, I think I would rather have the tool available to me as part of my community caregiving responsibilities so that I could at least make the inquiry rather than not. Because if I don't, I think at that point the liability issue becomes more pronounced.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Clark.
You know, I think 30 years ago I'd have been right out there with you young people. And believe me, I applaud your idealism. But as you get older and discover that you're no longer invulnerable, and you start to discover things about yourself and the people around you, you realize. And I think I'm confident enough of myself to say that I am not as responsible after 3 drinks as I am right now, or after 4, or whatever. So it's just the realism, of life. Public drinking has got to be a responsible act, and unless there's someone in charge, like in the boundaries of a permit of a restaurant or of a beer garden or something like that, unless there's someone there to guide you and say, no, you've had too much, maybe you ought to go home, here, have a glass of water, have a Coke or something like that. It's just the reality of life. It's just not a good thing. I've been there. I kind of like Keene now better than I did then. So and again, I really do applaud your idealism, but other than that, I've got to vote against this.
Thank you, Councilor Clark. I remember the 70s very, very well.
Well, that's a problem. I don't.
I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then that's it, because everyone else that has wanted to speak for the first and second time have. So this will be your last chance. And your hand was up first.
A couple things I just wanted to. Oh, Chris Miranda. Things real quick. I'm going to try to shoot through them. Number 1, is there anybody in charge of the nightcap celebrations? The answer is no, and these behaviors aren't going on. Number 2, I think everybody's glancing over the real problem and not striking the root. And they're trying to create distractions by saying, oh, well, we'll do this and it will prevent a school bus from being destroyed. We'll do this and it will prevent people from getting in the car and doing damage. The real problem is impairment, not open container. Also, as far as for the children goes, you can talk to your children. You can be honest with them, and they will listen to you. I know a lot of times they won't, especially if they're teenagers. I was one myself. But my father was a drunk. He used to beat my dog severely. And I had to watch this. He used to yell at me. I was always terrified that he would beat me as well. And I did not grow up to be a drunk. Correlation is not causation. And finally, a question that I'd like to direct through you towards the captain, or is it chief? I'm sorry.
Captain.
Out of the, I think he said 136 last year or this year? Last year, folks arrested for open container. How many of them were actually causing a problem, opposed to how many were not?
Captain Thom.
I would have to do some research. I'm not prepared to answer that just based on statistics, but I can, if it is important, could do some research, and I would have to read the reports and see how each one came about.
Okay. And I'm sorry, just a second. Did one of you have your hand up and I missed you? Okay. Yeah.
Aida Burgos, Street. I was just wondering about the permits for businesses again. Is there any way for an individual or a person to apply for a permit for outdoor drinking?
If you're looking at me for an answer, first of all, I don't issue the ordinances, but I'm having a hard time understanding how you would define the venue.
Well, I understand that businesses get a business license, correct? And they apply for the permit under that corporate entity, correct? Okay. Is there any way for a person, you, me, to apply for the permission to have outdoor drinking?
I guess my answer would be that not that I'm aware of under our current setup.
So there's absolutely no way that a human being can do it, but there's a way that a business can do it.
I'll answer that if it...
Sure.
An individual or a business may be licensed to sell alcohol in a specific location or venue.
Okay.
That is not just a business. An individual could get that license. So if you pick some sort of bar, the bar can be owned by me personally or can be owned by my corporation. Either one of those are able to be licensed.
Do you have to have a business license of some sort though? Because you're saying a bar. I couldn't get a liquor license and sell it from my home.
You would have to go to the New Hampshire Liquor Commission in order to get that type of license for a day. Yeah, that doesn't have anything to do with the city.
So, but my question is there any reason why there's a distinction between a business being able to...
Madam Chair, I stand here.
You have to speak up.
Is there any reason why there's a distinction between a business obtaining this license and a person being able to obtain a license? Or why is there that distinction? Or is
That'll be your last question, and I'm going to go to the city attorney for that question, for the answer to that.
I think I understand the sense of the question. I think after that Supreme Court decision that came down recently, everybody's wondering about this issue. But in terms of what you're trying to ask is there is essentially no distinction between businesses and individuals. You have to go to the Liquor Commission and you have to apply. The Liquor Commission has to make a determination as to whether or not you satisfy the requirements of the license. My understanding is if you want to do that as you individually opening up my pub under my name, the Liquor Commission will do that. If you want to go there as an LLC, they will do that. If you want to go there as a corporation, they will do that. But they're going to look at you and the character of you and whoever's running that business to make a determination as to whether you get the license or not. It doesn't matter whether you're a business or an individual.
The reason why I asked that is because you said that there needs to be someone in charge who says you've had too much, or is protecting the other people or the citizens of Keene from these intoxicated people who are purchasing alcohol and actually being out on the sidewalk. So if an individual could get out permission, they could keep track of people and say, hey, you've had too much, I'm being responsible for this area, I'm cleaning up the litter, protecting the children, whatever, but that option isn't out there for people.
Thank you. Did you have one last?
Yeah, I just wanted to address something Mr. Richards said, Sam Dotson.
Do me.
So of the bottles
Just
and
move the light just a little bit because it's bouncing off my glasses. Thank
sorry.
you.
Of the bottles and beer cans and things that he's finding in his shrubs, I'm kind of wondering how many of those are like coffee cups, Coke bottles versus.
Absolutely none.
Okay,
They're
so
all beer cans.
So my comment to that would be, why do you think people are wanting to throw away their beer cans in your bushes, but not their coffee cups, not their Coke bottles? It's because they're not illegal. It's the prohibition here, supported by the police, that is putting those bottles in your bushes, because if people weren't afraid of getting a ticket, they'd have no reason to throw them there in the first place. And the fact that you're finding no non-alcoholic bottles in your bushes supports that.
All set?
Yeah, thank you.
Last one, Councilor India.
I take exception to that. I have lived in downtown Keene for 30 years, and I have picked up Dunkin' Donuts cups. I have picked up McDonald's cups. I have picked up beer cans. I have picked up soda cans. I have picked up anything you can think of that has been tossed out windows on School Street, which is downtown Keene. And why people do that, I don't know. But it's not just alcohol, it's everything. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Councilor Richards.
Yeah, the other thing, people aren't doing it in the middle of the day when I'm there. They're doing it at 1 o'clock in the morning when I'm not. And they're not walking down the street drinking Coca-Cola or coffee out of a cup. All right, that's why they're throwing it in my yard. And if we change this, that just gives them more opportunity to do it. There's one other thought, and Jan brought it up about how, and this gentleman did too, about how alcohol affects people differently. I mean, I agree with what Terry said. I have 3 or 4, I change a little bit, but I tend to get chatty and happy. If you've been in a bar, you know that guy who gets into fistfights, has that many beers, and then his attitude changes. And if you've been around long enough, you've seen somebody do it, where they want to nail the guy sitting next to him, and now you're going to say that guy can walk down the street with a bottle in his hand. And I think that probably, if he leaves a bar angry like that and doesn't have a bottle in his hand, we're probably all a little better off for it.
I just have a quick comment. Heika, I want to thank you very much for bringing this toward the committee. I think everyone has gotten a really good idea of how this how the procedure works with anything that you bring to the City Council. It goes to a committee. This issue happened to end up at the MSFI committee. I greatly admire the way you've acted tonight and treated each other with respect and respected the committee meeting tonight. So thank you very much. And at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion.
Move this item as informational.
You need a second?
I'll second that.
Informational. All in favor?
Well, it was, wasn't it?
Did you get the motion, Bettina?
Move it as informational.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
It's fine. We're not going to change the ordinance.
Oh, okay.
All in favor? Councilor Clark?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Somebody's on hold.
Move to adjourn? Okay, we just.
Motion to adjourn.